Yo, what's going on, everybody? This is Nothing But Bangers, aka MBB, back with a huge Pokemon Pocket update. There was a tournament on October 12th, and in this video, I'm going to tell you the top 8 decks, talk about their deck list, talk about some interesting choices, and potentially give you some new spice to start brewing with. But what I want to go over first is the first place standings after Swiss. So this tournament, I believe, was 6 rounds, and then after those 6 rounds it cut to top 8, then top 4, then there was a 3rd and 4th place and the grand finals. So let's talk about these decks. Let's talk about the decks that performed very well in Swiss but maybe ended up kind of slowing down a little bit in top 8. So starting with the first place finisher after Swiss, they played Pikachu. So first place, they didn't lose a single match. They went undefeated throughout the day. So they played Pikachu EX. We'll talk about that deck list here in a second. Second place after Swiss was the very first spicy deck that I will mention in this video is Marowak with Kabutops. The third place after Swiss was a water deck that included Starmie EX. It included Greninja and Articuno EX, which of course makes sense. The fourth place deck after Swiss was a Pikachu EX deck. The fifth place deck was a Mewtwo and Gardevoir deck. The sixth place deck was another Pikachu EX deck, which is 3 if you're counting so far. The seventh place deck was a Exeggutor Victory Bell deck, very spicy. And then the 8th place deck, which went on to win the entire tournament, was a Mewtwo and Gardevoir deck. So, couple of cards to break down really quickly. Some of the most played trainers and supporters are going to be no surprise, but let's talk about Red Card, which has been a very polarizing card so far in Pokemon Pocket. And if you've watched any of my content, you know that I'm pretty high on Red Card. The biggest question that I have is whether or not you should be playing 2 of it or 1 of it. And looking at these numbers is very interesting. So there were 4 total players and 4 total copies of Red Card in the top 8 decks. When you got to top 4, 2 players played Red Card, so there was 2 copies left. And then in top 2, both the decks are playing Red Card. So it seems like, towards the end of the tournament, it did seem to be a card that, 50% of the decks had. And then in the top 2, obviously, both decks had them. So what does that mean? In my opinion, it means that Red Card is a card that you should probably be looking at playing 1 copy of at least, because its presence is going to help in a lot of different scenarios, which again, that's just kind of been my case for since the game came out now, right? Looking at Giovanni. So Giovanni, there were 7 total copies of Giovanni. 6 players brought Giovanni in the top 8. When you got to top 4, there were 4 copies of Giovanni and 3 players brought it. And then when you got to top 2, both players had Giovanni. So maybe that kind of means that extra 10 damage is good for a lot of math. However, it may be a direct correlation to one of the other trainer cards brought by a lot of players in the top 8. So Sabrina has been one of the best supporters since the game came out. It's got a total of 12 copies and 4 brought one of them. In top 4, there were 6 total copies of Sabrina and 4 players brought it. And then again, I just want to make sure that you guys can see these numbers on my screen as well as, see, me, but, it's more important that you see the numbers. So just had to double check that. But again, Sabrina, 6 total copies in top 4. All 4 players brought it. And then in top 2, both players brought Sabrina, and there were a total of 3 copies. Now, this is probably the most spicy trainer card out of the entire deck list that we see in the top 8. But there were 11 total potions in top 8. 6 players brought it, so that was really interesting for me because, again, that means that it was a very popular choice in the top 8 decks. In top 4, 7 out of 8 total copies were played. It was brought by 4 players in the top 4, so every player in top 4 brought it. And then in top 2, there were 4 total potions, so both players brought 2. So again, potion seems to be one of those cards that's good for extending the life of your Pokemon, potentially taking it out of that 2-hit range. So something to think about as you're constructing your own deck and coming up with your own brews. X Speed, which has been another popular card since the game has come out. Again, the game is not officially released for global, but again, you would expect that there will be a lot of players that are playing X Speed when the game globally releases. There were 13 total copies of X Speed played, and actually, now that I think about it, that math might be wrong. It might be 11. So I need to double check that math. But here's the reason why I'm highlighting X Speed. Every player but one brought X Speed. The only deck that did not bring it was the Kabutops and Marowak deck. So if I was looking at this, I'm just gonna assume that this is probably 10 or 11 total X Speeds. So again, just a quick correction as I'm kind of shooting this video live. In the top 4, all 4 players brought 2 copies of X Speed, and then in the top 2, both players played the maximum number of X Speed. So why is that the case? It allows you to be really flexible and get out of your active spot for free retreat in a lot of cases, and that's the reason why a lot of people play X Speed. So let's talk about the electric decks to start off. So there were 3 electric decks that made top 8, but there were 3 different shells. Okay, so let's talk about the first shell, the one that went undefeated in Swiss but lost in top 8. It played Zebstrika. Why is that interesting? Well, Zebstrika, which I have it up on the screen right now, so that way you can kind of check it out just in case you don't know what it does. It's got 1 retreat cost for 1 energy. It can deal 30 damage to any Pokemon on your opponent's side of the field, including the active spot. So it can snipe active or bench. So if your opponent's trying to stall in the first part of the game, switch out, and then, have a main attacker, Zebstrika can help you snipe, which is something that electric decks can't do unless they play Zebstrika. So really interesting choice there. And again, they went undefeated throughout Swiss. The one complaint that I saw them talk about was that Electabuzz seemed to be one of the worst cards in their deck. But again, it was clutch for them in one game where they were able to flip heads and high roll. So keep that in mind. We'll talk about the comparison to all 3. But so Zebstrika, they played 2 and 2. Now the other electric deck, it got 6th place in Swiss, but it ended up losing in top 2. This deck decided to play Voltorb and Electrode. So quickly just kind of highlighting this. Electrode. So it's got free retreat. It attacks for 2 energy. It does 70 damage. It's got 80 HP. And it also has synergy with Lieutenant Surge. But you'll notice this deck list did not play Lieutenant Surge. Okay, and it played 1 copy of Giovanni. So both the decks that I've talked about so far, identical trainers. However, the big difference is the Pokemon that they chose to play. No Electabuzz, no Lieutenant Surge, no Raichu for the top, the 6th place finisher that got top 2. The last electric deck, this person got 4th place in Swiss and then lost in top 4. But you'll notice they brought Lieutenant Surge, 1 copy. They brought 1 copy of Giovanni, and they brought 2 Electabuzz, and then 1 Pincurchin. Or excuse me, 2 Pincurchin. So they brought 2 Pincurchin. If you don't know what Pincurchin does, for 2 energy, it can attack. 2 electric type, it can attack. And if you flip heads, your opponent's Pokemon is now paralyzed. It also has 1 retreat cost. Personally, I don't like Pincurchin at all. I think it's a pricey attack, doesn't do enough damage, but paralyzes is very powerful when you do land it because there's no coin flip for your opponent. It just stays paralyzed for a turn. Double Electabuzz is also something that I'm not a fan of. Personally, and no red card, by the way, by this electric deck as well. So two of the 3 electric decks played red card. So personally, moving forward, the first electric deck that I want to test is going to play 1-1 Zebstrika. It's going to play Raichu and Pikachu, and then 2 Pikachu EX and 2 Zapdos EX. So that's my first takeaway from this. That's going to probably be the next shell that I want to test because I do think that Raichu and Lieutenant Surge gives you that nice finisher to finish off Mewtwo decks. It could finish off a lot of rogue decks as well. But I do like the ability to snipe and punish people for stalling and then switching out of that Pokemon. Or, being able to switch out. I want to be able to snipe Pokemon on their bench too. So again, I do want to try that out. But it's very obvious that Pikachu EX is here to stay for the most part, and you're going to continue to see more of this deck. Now, let's talk about the winner. The winning deck was brought by a person that goes by Jaden. They finished 8th place after Swiss, but they ended up winning the entire tournament. So let's talk about this deck a little bit more. You'll notice there's one big difference in these deck lists. One big difference is there's no other basics outside of Ralts and Mewtwo. Those are the only basics that Jaden decided to bring. You'll also notice the inclusion of double Giovanni. That's potentially to make some of the math correct, maybe some of the chip damage, I don't know. One red card brought by the winning deck list and double potion. So if you look at both these Mewtwo Gardevoir decks, you'll notice double potion, one red card. I mean, there's a lot of similarities. The only difference really is Meowth was brought by Ant, who finished 5th place after Swiss, but lost in top 8. Again, Meowth was brought, but they only brought one Giovanni, so that's the big difference, right? -1 Giovanni, +1 Meowth. So these deck lists are almost identical. The one thing that really stands out to me is that Mewtwo is really consistent. Like, Mewtwo Gardevoir is really consistent. It's probably one of the most games look the same. Like, that's one of the things that I noticed in playing it. If you've seen me stream or seen some of my content, you'll notice that's one of the first things that I point out. Personally, I do like Jinx, but I do see a lot of validity to just playing only 2 and 2 in terms of basics, 2 Ralts and 2 Mewtwo. But again, I think Mewtwo Gardevoir, it has a solid matchup into Pikachu, and that's one of the reasons why it did so well. One thing that I do want to point out is Jaden was undefeated against Pikachu EX Decks, so that kind of stood out. But in Swiss, they ended up losing against the Exeggutor and Victory Bell deck, and they also lost to the Water deck that I'm about to talk about. So really interesting. But also just, to put an asterisk, Ant, I believe, lost in top 8 to an Electric deck. Let me just double check this for everybody. Yeah, in top 8, they lost to a Pikachu deck. So, I don't know. Maybe there's something to Mewtwo and Gardevoir having a good matchup against Pikachu EX. Maybe that's the case. But again, just not enough sample size for me to definitively say, but maybe you come across that in your testing. So, let's talk about the spicy decks. As well as the Water Misty dot deck. Again, when I looked at this deck in the deck submissions, the Water deck, I was not impressed by it. I didn't think that it would do very well, but it ended up getting top 8. Maybe that's the power of Misty. I don't know. I can't really say because I didn't watch every single one of their games. But it is worth noting that, the reason why I didn't like this deck is because it just seems like it's being pulled in so many directions. You got the Lapras, you got the Starmie EX, you got the Articuno, then you also got the one of Greninja. It just seems like it's being pulled in too many directions. I think it needs to be slimmed down. I think if you slimmed it down, sure, it would take away some of that versatility, but I think that makes the deck more consistent and, able to win more games. That's just my personal choice. So to me, I didn't like this Water deck list. One thing that Vegas did also share is that they played 4 Pikachu decks and they went 2 and 2 against them. 1-0 against Mewtwo, 1-0 against Gengar Control, and then 1-0 against Blaine, Ninetales dot deck. So that's something that I was able to kind of scrape from the chat. So take that for what you will. But again, I just think that the Water deck is being pulled in too many directions. Now, let's get to the first spicy deck of the top 8. The one that you've probably been waiting for, that you might have watched this video for. Victory Bell with Exeggutor, and Exeggutor EX. So let's just refresh our memory for what these cards do. So Victory Bell is a stage 2 that has 2 retreat costs. For 2 energy, it hits for 60, but the shining ability of this is its Pokemon ability. It has the ability to take, if it's in your active spot, you can, once during your turn, switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon that's basic into its active spot. So if your opponent has a basic EX that has some damage on it, it can bring it out and KO it. Very, very spicy ability. Also, if your opponent has a basic Pokemon on their bench that's 60 HP, you may have knocked out an EX already, and that now Victory Bell is going to come in and win you the game, okay? Because it can one-shot a lot of basic Pokemon, because a lot of basic Pokemon only have 60 HP. With Giovanni, it can knock out a Pokemon that has, 70 HP. But again, this deck did not play Giovanni. So keep that in mind. But again, if it had chip damage, could potentially be a knockout on an EX and win the game. Now, what does Exeggutor? What do the Exeggutors do? The non-EX Exeggutor is 30 damage plus 30 more damage if you flip heads. And again, this is a 1 energy attacker. That's one of the big things that this deck is going to be really good at, because against Pikachu EX and against that electric deck, it's going to be able to start chipping away at Pikachu EX, and it's going to be able to heal with the trainer Erica as well, so the supporter Erica. The EX version of Exeggutor does kind of a bigger version of just the regular Pokemon that's Exeggutor. This is going to be for 1 energy. It can swing. It deals 40 base, but if you flip heads, it deals 40 more. The biggest weakness of Exeggutor is going to be the retreat cost. So again, you look at both of these Exeggutors, they've got 3 retreat cost, and then when you take a look at the Victory Bell, it's got 2 retreat cost. So that's a big reason why this person chose to bring double X speed, because it can help kind of slim down that retreat cost. And also you got to remember, like, these attacks are pretty cheap, right? The most expensive attack in the entire deck is 2 energy. So, you can, get away with retreating for those high cost if you play X speed, and because your attacks don't cost that much. 1 Sabrina, no red card. Pretty interesting. But again, the double Erica did help extend the life of their Pokemon, and they could make you play a long game by just not playing an EX as well. So make you earn those 3 knockouts while they're chipping away and healing at your EXs. And then if you're playing basic EXs, they can bring them out with Victory Bell. So very spicy deck. I will be streaming this week, so look forward to me playing that deck as well. The last deck that I'm going to talk about, and again, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to watch my content as I recap this tournament. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button. Think about leaving a comment, and I hope you tune in for more of my videos. But let's talk about this Marowak and Kabutops deck. It's going to share one of the traits that I just spoke about, where it can make you play the long game. They do not have to play Marowak EX. They can play the regular Marowak and make you do damage that way as well. So this is a really interesting deck because it's the first fossil to really see, competitive gameplay, quote unquote competitive, because again, the game is still not globally released, But I think one of the big reasons why Kabutops saw play in this deck is because it has cheap attacks. So it's not a fossil that you have to build up and you have to attach energy to. Like, it's attacking for 1 energy and it's retreating for 1 energy. So very, very good, just basic fundamentals of a card right now. On top of that, the potions in this deck can help extend the life of all the Pokemon in this deck. But what's really interesting about Kabutops is that, for one, Kabuto, it's got 90 HP. For 1 energy, it's dealing 40, so potentially as much as 60 damage to Pikachu EX. When you take a look at Kabutops, it's 50 damage, but here's the kicker. It's going to heal itself the same amount of damage that you do to your opponent's Pokemon. So if you have a Pokemon that you're attacking for weakness, it's going to heal for 70 damage. If you have Giovanni and you play Giovanni, it's going to heal for 10 more damage, right? So it's going to heal 60 total damage if you have Giovanni. If you're attacking weakness and Giovanni, it's going to heal 80 damage. So yeah, that's a lot of damage that it's healing. It's kind of like a mini Venusaur EX, but way cheaper. So very spicy, pick by this person that brought it. They finished I said they finished second, but I think I have, let's see, let me just double check that. Yeah. So they finished second after Swiss. I think I might have misspoke earlier, but they finished second after Swiss, and lost in top 8 to the Victory Bell deck. So that weakness and the sniping played a huge factor in that matchup, by the way. But again, Marowak can attack for 1 energy, or it can try to high roll you. So that's a couple of the differences there. But again, very spicy deck. Included, a couple of potions, Giovanni, and then double Sabrina. So not too much to talk about there. But again, I hope you enjoyed my coverage of these top 8 decks. And I hope that you stay tuned towards the end of this video so you can check out more of my content.